the thing I would say is being a single tool player, if you follow baseball or sports or anything, is not enough, I don't think, in startup world. You have to be sort of an expert, but you can't just be the stolen base guy or the slam dunk guy. You really have to have the ability to have a multi-tool set stack. You have to be able to pick whatever it is that you're good at or that you know. You have to start adding a couple of things to that, and then you have to figure out what you're not going to focus your time on, and then outsource that capability.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Scott McCrady. And Scott, or Craddy, or however or you might pronounce it. And Scott started his journey, went to high school in a small town in Texas, found computers to be interesting, and so went off to college. And during a part of the college studies, I got an internship at IBM. And then from there, I think graduated and went to work for a smaller company and went into the financials, went to a financial services company, and then decided to move off to DC and went into sales and doing technical solutions. And then from there, went off to Sydney, Australia, working for Symantec, doing some managed services. From there got to travel a bit to Japan and enjoyed building businesses. I'm in the country from scratch. Moved back to DC, and then went to work for a smaller company. Went to Singapore for a period of time, and then moved back to the U.S. again and started the business, which is what he's doing today. So with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Scott.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely excited to have you here. So, well, I just gave kind of a quick overview to a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that a bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started growing up in a small town, going to high school in Texas.
Yeah, I we were sort of lucky. We were living in Florida, and we moved to Dallas just for more opportunities. And I was lucky in the fact that the school we went to had a pretty good computer department, high school, public school, good computer department. And it was funny. One summer, my best friend, his parents owned a janitorial company, and they had databases and they do marketing. And remember the old days? We'd you get the letterhead and the envelopes, and you print them out and you mail them out. And they're having some problems. So I went up there and actually helped them for a few weeks. And that was like my first quote unquote job in technology, was helping them with their databases and printing envelopes. That sort of put me on this path. I went to university, and during that time, I got an internship at IBM. I worked in the university department, computer department at the university. A bunch of funny stories there. We were working. Anybody who's in tech may remember some of these things. We were working on Novell networks, and the very first multiplayer game came out. Some engineers at Novell had developed a space game where you had a circle and a square and like a rectangle, and you'd fly around and you'd try to shoot each other. It's called Net Wars, and that was like the first. And we just thought that was the coolest thing ever. We were throwing dip switches on network cards. I brought down the entire network campus on campus one time because I actually got a dip switch flipped the wrong way. And back then, we had this big long write out of all the LAN card networks, and so it was just like really sort of for us in the basics of computing, and it was a great place to get a start. One of the things that was really interesting was I actually was a volunteer English teacher. So between my sophomore and junior year, the university had set up these programs around the world where you could be a volunteer, somewhere to help kids in English, somewhere to help with kids with special needs. And so 6 of us got sent to Thailand to help underprivileged kids with speaking English. And I think that was sort of what got me interested in the international work. It's very eye-opening for someone who'd never been on a plane before to fly to Thailand and spend a year over there. Learn Thai, still speak it to this day. And it was just one of those transformative type of opportunities. And so I think that's sort of the arc was I needed something to make money. We weren't super wealthy. Computers seemed logical. It also seemed like a good up and coming field. Got lucky that I got was one of the kids selected to go overseas. Got to spend some time overseas, and I think the broaden your horizons, take some risks, do something outside your comfort zone while also working in computers really is a large part of the arc of my career and my background.
Oh, makes perfect sense. So I kind of got into computers early on, found that to be an interesting field and a good opportunity. Now you went off to college. You mentioned, doing or traveling around a bit of that time. Now coming out of college, I think you went to work for a smaller company and did some financial services, or kind of maybe fills in kind of coming out of college, or kind of where did the career journey start?
Yeah, I actually got a job at Electronic Data Systems. So they were supporting financial customers themselves, pretty large company. And at the time, I thought, oh, large company, pretty safe place to be. Again, I got a little bit lucky in the fact that web hosting was really, this is pre 2000.com boom, or right smack in the middle of it. And one of the best parts about the job was security was really becoming a thing. This was back uh, when we were moving from the days of antivirus over to something more complicated for enterprises. And I got tasked with helping to build out security for the web hosting infrastructure that EDS was standing up. Um, and so I had a background in computers and networking, but going into security just seemed interesting. It just seemed like one of those things that was going to be where some of the quote unquote action is. I don't know if there is action in computers, but if there is, it seemed like information security was where it's going to be. And so that's was sort of I spent 5 years there, and it was starting out at a pretty sort of stock standard networking, build networks, and then I during that time I switched into security, which is where I've stayed basically for now 20 25 years. Um, but the ability to get your hands dirty, actually build out the components. Even today, we talk about it a lot. A lot of us from that generation, we sort of had to do everything, and I think this will tie back to some of the questions you have at the end of like, if you're going into your own startup, what do you, what do you need to do, and what are the lessons learned? Definitely understanding how the architectural components hang together is a real benefit in life versus it's always good to have a specialty that you're really particularly good at. But understanding how that specialty ties into lots of other things is just one of those things that's super helpful. And back in the day, we all sort of had to do that because it all did hang together and you had to understand those pieces.
Gotcha, makes sense. And so now kind of walking through things a bit more. So you'd started out doing that, and then you moved to DC and then to Australia and
Yeah.
went a few places. So maybe walk us through a little bit, kind of, what led to those different opportunities and kind of that evolution of the journey.
Yeah, so after 4 or 5 years, I definitely was in the headspace of I want to make a bigger impact, and it seemed like the logical place to do that was with smaller companies. And in the last year or two, I'd been spent most of my time in the security standpoint. So it's like, okay, what smaller company is in security where you can go make a difference? And part of what I was doing at EDS was standing up operating centers. So this was deploy the security infrastructure, then gather the data, and then you had to do something with that data. And so we all had these big, beautiful operating centers, which think NASA with the big screens, and we talk about how the telecommunications all work. But at the time, there were very few, if any, security operating centers. So what happened to the security data? So I started to do that, and there was a company that was specializing in that called RipTech. And right as I was joining them, they were being acquired by Symantec. So I was trying to get to a smaller company, end up getting working with Symantec for quite a few years. Got sent to DC, which was where the headquarters of the managed services business was. And at the time, they were looking to expand to Asia. And so we had a good business in the US, we had a small business in Europe, and almost no presence in APJ. And again, is one of those things where it's like, I would love the opportunity to build something from scratch. In this particular case, we already had the product or the productized service. So got sent to Sydney to build out the Asia Pacific Japan business. For anybody who's older, you remember the old days of don't throw me in the briar patch. Like, you have to go to Sydney, Australia for 4 years to build out Pacific Japan. It was an amazing opportunity. I loved Asia, living in Thailand before you sort of got the energy of the area. And one of the, if people haven't been to Asia, there's a real um, passion and vibrancy to Asia that is very different than I think you get in Europe. You definitely get some of that in the US. And so this ability to start something from scratch, but also do it in this area that was very up and coming. China was on the upswing, Singapore was on the upswing, Hong Kong was going through the transition from Britain, British 99-year rule to China. There's just a lot happening, and it was just a fantastic place to spend 4 years. We had a fantastic success. And then you obviously, again, if you want to make an impact, there's no better way to do that than to say, okay, let's start my own division in this, sort of far-flung area of the world.
Makes sense. Sounds like it's
Yeah.
also a fun time. Got to see a lot of different parts of the world now. Within that, I know you mentioned you did Sydney, Australia. Was Japan part of that with
Yep.
Semantic, or was that a different opportunity?
That was the same one. So spent a lot of time, didn't live in Japan, but was up there probably, I don't know, once a month at least. And we built a security operations center in Tokyo. And then we had a partnership in Tokyo as well. So Japan is a huge security market. They run the country is just a very well structured business, and so security matters to them a lot. And so we had a great business in Japan. Uh, Great place to do business, and also just a great way about sort of learning how to really structure things the right way. Anytime you're doing business in Japan, you really do have to have your I's dotted and T's crossed, and it really sort of forces a level of discipline on the way you run your business, which is a really good thing for someone that was young like I was at the time.
Makes sense. Sounds like a good different areas of the world to get some great experience. Now, at some point, kind of on that journey, when we chatted a bit for you, eventually decided to come back to DC. Now, was that again with Semantic, and was that kind of, hey, I'm
Yep.
wanting to come back to the US, or otherwise wanting to shift focus or different opportunity, or kind of walk us through kind of what took you from living abroad to coming back to the US?
Yeah, so that was just straight promotion. So I ran one of the regions for the MSSP business. So when I came back to DC, I basically took over the global managed security services operations. And so we had at the time, I think, six security operations centers around the world. It's a really big business. I think we were probably the largest managed security services business, and it was a great opportunity. Super fun. DC is a great place to live, big business, and really enjoyed it. And but that put me at about 12 years at Symantec. Uh, Massive opportunity, and sort of loved every minute. The MSSP business, we did amazingly well over that time frame. Symantec itself as a corporation sort of struggled. I think when I joined, the stock was like at 21, 22, and when I left 12 years later, it was like 18. So, there was one of these things where you always had this sense of our business is going well, which was very exciting and makes you want to stay. But Symantec core business was just sort of treading water, which really led to the transition over to FireEye, who eventually bought Mandiant. Again, trying to get to a smaller place where you can make a bigger impact. FireEye, really well-known brand in the security space, transformative security technology when it came out. At the time, this was really when the nation states were getting super aggressive. For those who don't sort of know the background, um, prior to this sort of 2012, 2013, we had these sort of gentlemen's agreement inside of the security world, probably similarly structured to maybe at the nation state level, which was organized crime and hackers and hacktivists would attack organizations, and governments would attack other governments. And so the U.S. could, attack whomever, and the Chinese could attack whomever, and the Russians could attack whomever. So we used to call that elephant stampeding. And in the private sector, we didn't get in the way of that. Let them go do what the governments do, and we were going to help the private organizations, secure themselves from, again, organized crime and some really sophisticated actors out there, but not nation state. In that time frame was really when you saw the nation states get involved in attacking private companies, and that was a new thing. And private companies were not really in a position to withstand that kind of consistent and sophisticated level of attack. And so FireEye was the first organization that really had a clear way of telling when a nation state was attacking an organization, and being able to do something about it. So super, super fun, super exciting. Pre-IPO, you're trying to build a company from scratch that was really in a position to offer insights that people were just desperate for, but didn't really have a way of getting it. And so uh, got went to FireEye, got sent to Singapore because, as with anyone who's joined IPOs, you tend to have three or four different jobs. So that role was to stand up the managed security services business, to start working with their system integrators, and also help with Asia Pacific and Japan and start growing that business. And so it was sort of a three-hatted role, super fun, super exciting. Singapore really had transformed itself as a country and was leading sort of the new APJ place to base out of. So as the new tech companies like Google and Facebook and all these other organizations were coming into region, they were all coming to Singapore. Where before you used to see this play out about Hong Kong. You used to see a lot of organization moving into Hong Kong, but that was sort of slowing down. And Singapore was on the ascent, and so being based there was a great place to sort of watch Asia as it transformed with the new tech companies coming in and making an impact.
Well, it sounds like it was a good ongoing opportunities to work on a
Yeah.
lot of different parts of the world. Now, at one point, I think you mentioned so or kind of catching up a bit more of where things are at today, which is so you done worked for some larger businesses across different countries and having a lot of those opportunities. And then at one point, you kind of, I don't know, or got the bug or desire, or wanted to kind of go in your own direction or start your own thing, which is kind of what leads to a bit more of where you're at today. But maybe walk us through a little bit. How did that evolve, or how did you kind of shift the gears from, hey, I'm going to work for some of the the larger businesses in a lot of different countries, to coming back to the U.S. and focusing on doing the business, your own business, or what you're at today?
Yeah. So anytime you, at least for most of the people I know, anytime you've done these different types of roles around the world, you're always in the back of your mind saying, how do I take this and make something that's interesting, compelling, that customers could really use? Managed services is where I spent most of my time, but after FireEye Mandiant, I helped with a lot of other types of businesses, essentially consulting engagements, a couple year consulting engagements for different companies. But there was really a need for a different type of managed security services offering. And so without going into the weeds, which people can look us up, but without going into the weeds, the traditional managed security service was essentially an alerting service. We would just send to these very large customers data that would say, hey, we think something bad's happening. And these large companies had the ability to consume that and do something about it because they had lots of money, they had lots of people, and they had lots of smart people, and they had lots of people that worked in security. But we were finding in the even large enterprise, but maybe the lower larger, think 15,000 employees, 20,000 employees, not 200,000 employees. They were really struggling with, how do I know something bad's happening? How do we validate that? And then how do we respond to that in a timely and effective manner? A, that was a struggle. And then B, when that wasn't happening, how do we continue to evolve our security, or what we call in peacetime, to continue to make ourselves more secure? And managed services were doing a poor job on A, and it was none of the B. And so the view was, okay, there's really a massive opportunity here to reimagine how managed services is delivered. We got called the other day, which I love it. And I told the guys in my scale, he goes, you guys are like a managed services partner, managed security services partner. He goes, you guys help us with so much other stuff. And so that was really the idea behind Soul Cyber was, as managed services has sort of been stationary or stagnant for 20 years, and companies are saying things like, we want more help, we need more help, we need our smart people and our security people to shift left, to do more work in security operations and development, to embed security into what we do, into what we build. So having them run these tools and do response doesn't make as much sense as it made 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that was really the idea around Soul Cyber, was to say, okay, if customers are asking for that, how do you deliver that in a compelling, easy to use package?
No, you just said, okay, that's kind of almost, identify the shortcoming or the gap in the marketplace, and an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to kind of build out and build a business around it. Now, as you shifted, kind of one of the things a lot of times you get into as you're doing your own business is, different when you have the, I don't know, the backing or the infrastructure and the system, a lot of times with a large business or someone that's otherwise managing or running that, versus kind of getting into your own business, having to figure that out, having to do a lot of those, our tasks are different. Some people get into it and they love it. Others say, hey, I wish I'd got, just stuck with working for others and doing the things that, that I want to focus on. So as you're kind of diving in, kind of how did the evolution of the business go? Does it, continue to grow and expand, and then love it, enjoy it, or have regrets, or look back and is somewhere in the middle, or kind of walk us through a little bit of that evolution of the business?
That's a great question. And I try to be transparent for people because, it feels like you have to say it's the best thing ever to start your own company. It feels like society wants you to say that. Uh, and there's so many great aspects and of it. But the way I would approach it is, when I was at Symantec, I was essentially a CEO, I was a general manager, a CEO of a business that was very supported by lots of other business. And so, in a way, you sort of get the best of both worlds in the fact that you're getting to build something from scratch, but your risk obviously is a lot lower. Um, that being said, uh, starting your own company, I don't know if there are too many things more fulfilling. Having kids is probably a very similar experience in the fact that um, it's really fun to be able to craft something that you know makes a difference and to see your vision play out. It comes with a level of stress and pressure that you never face when you're a general manager, even if you're a mini CEO, a general manager in a larger company. There's no way that the stress and pressure of that compares to being a CEO of your own company. So what I tell everybody is it's amazingly rewarding and fulfilling. It's really you get to work with people that you get to pick. So you get these smart people that are very committed. Uh, there's nothing better than a customer saying, "Man, I've never seen anything like that. This is really helping me." Like those things really move the needle. On the other hand, you got to raise money, and you got board meetings, and you have to do you do press, and you get pulled into things that for a lot of us who are technologists, that's not something that we tended to learn natively. Nobody in school taught us how to deal with, the press or the media or things along those lines. And so, um, highly recommend it if you are committed to something and you really think it's going to make a difference to organizations. But it is a level of stress and risk that you don't engender, even if you're pretty senior up, in my opinion, in a larger company.
No, makes perfect sense and sounds like the path that a lot of people figure out as they go through on their own business now. So kind of with that, kind of catch us up. Where's the business at today? Kind of where are things headed? Kind of how are things going?
So business is good. What's happened is we keep getting pulled up market, which is interesting. So when we started Soul Cyber, the view was that medium-sized companies, think 1,000 employees, 500 employees, 5,000 employees, we thought that they would really need the most help. And what's been probably the most interesting in the last year or so is we get pulled into a lot of deals and opportunities with 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 employees. And so ironically, it seems like there's still a challenge, even when you're larger, or what we all think of larger, and you think they'd be able to sort of solve this problem on their own. Um, we're getting pulled up into a larger cohort in our ideal customer profile. So um, that's a good problem to have, right? Because obviously, larger customers, larger deal size, it's actually easier to deliver services to one 20,000 seat company than it is probably to 10 1,000 seat companies. But we still really want to support that sort of medium sized companies. So, you've got 500 employees or 1,000, because we sort of believe that those companies are, um, they're so important to the US economy. They struggle to get security the way they need to get it done. On our board is a gentleman by the name of General Keith Alexander. He started US Cyber Command, and his view is the same, which is this mid-market company just struggles to be able to, they're so competitive to get the security they need. So we still continue to focus there, but ironically, we're getting pulled up market to companies that are saying, "Hey, we can't do this, or we don't want to do this anymore. We've been doing it. It's hard. It's difficult." And so obviously, we're going to take advantage of that while we can.
No, makes sense and kind of always interesting to see sometimes where the business evolves or where it goes and kind of where you want to or where you initially intended to focus versus where the market is telling you that they want you. And sometimes that
Yeah.
matches up and sometimes you get to adjust as things are a bit different than initially anticipated. So it sounds like a mixture of a bit of both, but definitely
Well, Devin,
great
you've done this a
opportunity.
long time. You probably see this all the time, which is people having an image of where they think you're going to land, and you end up sort of over in a different place because you have to follow what people are saying and what they say they want, and obviously the people that have the proclivity to buy your service or product.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey and kind of where things are at today, great time to transition to the two questions always kind of, or I like to ask towards the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
First, I'm really glad you put these out beforehand because I actually did think about it. I'm going to pick one that is actually difficult to articulate because I think it's maybe something that everybody else has thought about, which was we're making a major organizational change. I was a very young, relatively young manager. I'd been promoted through the ranks very quickly. So I was very senior. And the change was significant. And my view was we should take the change slower. My boss and said, rip the band-aid off, do it fast. And so my gut was saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You know, take the time, give everybody time to consume the change. Um, and I ended up doing it fast because that was a strong recommendation. I trusted the view on that. And it was honestly one of the worst decisions I ever made. It caused a lot of pain and suffering and transitional angst that we just didn't need to have. And so the reason I bring it up is I think a lot of people who want to be senior leaders have to sort of think through, and I think you have to really get good mentors and get to a place where you trust the mentors, and then still find some way to balance your intuition in the situation because you're going to be responsible for whatever decision is made at the end of the day. And two, you're the closest to the problem, no matter what your boss or your mentor tells you. And so I don't know if I have a good answer, except for the fact that you have to be prepared to really analyze what your gut and instincts are saying, while also being willing to take in advice from people that are smart and that have been doing this a long time. And so, like a lot of things in life, there's this almost these two conflicting thoughts that you have to be able to hold in your mind at the same time. And so that was definitely probably one of the biggest lessons I learned, which was I didn't follow my intuition and my gut caused a lot of problems that I think could have been avoided while listening to somebody that I respected and gave me advice versus doing what I thought I should have done.
No, makes sense, and sounds like a good mistake to learn from, and a good lesson learned. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Second question now that I'd like to ask you. So now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb that you'd recommend?
Yeah, the thing I would say is being a single tool player, if you follow baseball or sports or anything, is not enough, I don't think, in startup world. You have to be sort of an expert, but you can't just be the stolen base guy or the slam dunk guy. You really have to have the ability to have a multi-tool set stack. You have to be able to pick whatever it is that you're good at or that you know. You have to start adding a couple of things to that, and then you have to figure out what you're not going to focus your time on, and then outsource that capability. So, as an example, let's just say you're an amazing developer and you have this vision for this amazing tool. Great. If you then choose that running the finances to an nth degree isn't what you want to do, find somebody to do that. But on top of that, that may mean that you also need to be an architect and a spokesperson. So you need to be able to do public speaking or handle, media. And maybe that's not something you're comfortable with. And so what I tell everybody is you're obviously good at something if you're thinking about starting your own company. There are probably two or three other critical things that you need to learn or to be able to do. And there's probably another four or five that you can outsource. And so, yes, I know the balance sheet really well at Soul Cyber. I understand how it all works, but I'm an amazing CFO. And so I spend a lot less time there and I spend a lot more time on the sales side as an example. And so what I would tell anybody who wants to get into the space, get a multi-tool set stack, figure out what those are, and then recognize that then you're going to outsource the other pieces. And now you have clarity that in order to make the company successful, if you need these 8 different capabilities, you're going to do 3 and you're going to outsource 5 to a variety of people. And that's going to make life better, and it's going to make clarity for the different people in the company, and it's going to give you a higher chance of success.
No, it's a great rule of thumb and great takeaways. So, well, now as we do reach towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above. What's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Super open. It's Scott at Soul Cyber, SOLCYBER. So Soul is the sun, but Spanish spelling. And then obviously soulcyber.com and you can get us. Somebody's always there, so feel free to ping us at any time.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand their network, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Scott, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Scott, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it.